Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of What If Civilization Started Over. In the last episode, we saw pretty much three events happen. The first one was. Oh, no, wait. The first one was a big union took place in down here. Um, started off with Malta and Sicily, or Malta and Crete. Then we saw Sparta was allowed allowed to leave these guys to join it. And then Italy joined and the Corsica country joined as well. Um but Switzerland didn't like that, so they invaded these guys and started World War Six. So there's been a lot of nukes dropped, and also this isn't World War Six, this is only World War Three. But let's get started with the war. So one thing I forgot to do was power rankings in the last episode I was going to and then didn't. Um, yeah, we're just gonna do power rankings after this all ends because honestly most of the power rankings kind of stayed the same if I'm being honest. But anyway, let's get into the video. We'll start off right where this whole thing started as um as we see the Swiss firstly enter up here. And, I'm going to make my, what the heck? Alright, there. Alright, so I'm firstly gonna make this a bit bigger. So we see the Swiss center down, taking one of many capitals in this country. It's got 5, so that's quite a bit. And they also enter into Swiss territory. Like, they only go down about so far. But the Swiss are not, they're not, they're not the only ones invading. So we see Anna, you see the Adriatic Union. We'll start pushing in, take some land here. I do believe that they used to have land over here, although I'm not certain. But they they invade a bit deeper into this country. Um, they kind of spearhead towards the capital, firstly the city. But the Swiss moved all of their forces down here, which was a really dumb mistake, or so it was thought, as these forces down here pushed through to the um whatever this bay is, captured the Italian capital, and from there are able to make a naval landing in the Adriatic Union. However, they did also have a mistake in that plan, as the Great Empire had forces stationed in these guys. So they're only using their own forces to push up here, whereas some of the Great Empire's forces are fighting down here. This isn't the only place we see fighting involving the Adriatic Union, though, as the Lime team up here is invaded as well, because why wouldn't they be? These guys did suffer one nuclear bomb, which was up here. So they're going to have a bit of a harder time expanding out in that front than any other, but also kind of up here. Swiss did have some forces left, but the Swiss got destroyed by nuclear bombs. So, all of the big countries in the world got destroyed by nuclear bombs. All right, and with that being so, we do see the Great Empire. They start off doing decent. They definitely could be doing better to start off if they were at their uh I would what I would say is was their peak, which was right before the World War started. Um, but yeah, keep they keep pushing through. The Lime team, then they make their own pushes up here in Baltic country, taking a major city. Russia becomes a bit harder to push into. However, they still manage to push in a bit more for a bit, and once again take the Russian capital. They kind of did this as they had troops kind of coming in here from both sides, and uh, well, that's the first, that's third capital captured in the war, but this is probably the biggest. This is probably going to be the biggest one for a decent while. We see the Swiss are going to start getting aid from some of their other allies out here. However, the Iberians, even West France a bit, and these guys are so Swi the Swiss have aid coming in from Sweden. These guys and these or from really just Sweden and North France. The Iberians are busy with these two. West France is also kind of busy with him. Ireland's kind of busy with England. So it's all jumbled up. Swiss don't really have any good like regions where they're prominent in. So it's kind of hard for them to really do much of anything other than fight in Europe. Mostly, eh. But we do see Catalonia and well, just really Catalonia getting aid from these two here. However, they are focusing their aid onto the Union, the Mediterranean Union. Yeah, that's what I'm just gonna call it, the Mediterranean Union. And we see this aid proving to be quite useful, as firstly it's able to recapture all of their Sicilian territory, and then also is able to push into the Swiss claim in their territory. Over here, we kind of see this goes in favor of the area in the war more goes in favor of the diamonds. We see Galicia does the first offensive here as they're able to capture two major cities in the Dark Sign team, as that, as said, Dark Sign team is getting pinned by two countries, really, and they seem to be working to split it in half. Now, if you remember, these two used to have close ties, and these two used to have close ties. These two's ties are severed. However, out of all the countries that are fighting each other in the war, these two have the best ties, and they are actually pretty good. They're on par with countries that are in the same alliance, such as like Swiss and West France, who have a bit of a history with one another. But yeah. So we see the we see there actually doesn't end up being any invasions in this area, and these three Iberian countries actually decide we're gonna work together, just separate alliances. If it comes down to it, we'll probably fight though. But so they work pretty well together, as it turns out. You see Catalonia comes in here, so there isn't any fronts moved on in the up or in Iberia other than front against these guys, which also doesn't last very long, as pretty quickly their capital is captured and the nation falls. So now we see Catalonia focusing its forces up here, whereas the two the other two Iberians spread their forces out, fighting elsewhere, mostly in the Caribbean. Uh, As for Ireland and their movements, it's very simple, as it does not take them long at all to go in and capture a lot of English land with their new foothold up in um, northern England. It it's not it's not gonna go well for England. They, unlike the Dark Sign team, are able to hold out, as these two are closer in strength than these three versus first one. Alright, over here we see Switzerland does manage to invade Catalonia quite a bit, as Catalonia wanted to focus its forces to fight against these guys. They knew they could work out some peace deal with them, but they know that's not going to happen with Switzerland. West France kind of is in the agreement here. They don't really want to fight Catalonia either. They've been decent allies for some time after, World War One and everything. I think these two were opposing sides. But anyway, um, these guys don't really fight. They'll kind of, they'll still kind of send aid into Switzerland, which is mostly spent in this front here. North France, North France is like the closest to Switzerland. Um, as in like the countries that are fighting with Switzerland right now, other than the Caribbean nation. They're really the closest. So they send a lot of their aid in, which leads to the Adriatic Union getting pushed back a bit. However, the Swiss are still super weak, and they're not really able to hold much of their own. We see Finland's extra forces not really being able to do much, as another front line pops up over here. Um, most of the most of this border is really just stalemates. There's a few pockets where the Great Empire has a push, but there's not really any major Russian fronts or any major like, Russian pushes. Um, and it also doesn't help that it appears Siberia has still been uh doing terrorist attacks on Russia, and Russia's been keeping it a secret, and we find that out after some some people that are from the Great Empire went up to this major city here, and now the Great Empire is coming up here not to or they're not coming up here to like invade it and to attack it. They're here to kind of help restore it. And once this is found out, a lot of the Russian major cities are kind of like, you know what, let's just switch sides. And a lot of the Russian population has now turned against Russia, as like this has been kept a secret for quite some time now. This is this is breaking news for most of the world. So we see quite a bit of Russia is like especially out in the east of the country. like east of that line, it's a lot of people are favoring the Great Empire. So we see this kind of being like, yeah, it's not going too well for Russia, or really just for Switzerland. Um, they've lo- they've pretty much lost this. They've pretty much lost Russia as an ally and this country. However, all of their other fronts, except for right here, are going pretty well. Also, right here. But it's time we move on to another area. Coming out here, it's pretty much the war that happened 2 episodes ago, but suddenly Canada is stronger. Well, it's not really suddenly. They got like a lot of decent, not a lot of decent land, really, actually. But they got land, and they also got aid from certain somebody who really could use that aid back. If I were to have done power rankings, the Great Lakes Empire wouldn't be in the top 5. And like I also said in the last episode, new countries have kind of taken over a lot of the alliances. For example, with the diamonds, it was kind of Russia, but now it's moved from Russia. It's not really Switzerland. Switzerland can't lead anymore. But Sweden, it's really between a lot of the powers in, or it's like between a lot of countries in the diamonds, like Sweden, Ireland, West France, Galicia, and Gibraltar. They're all kind of debating who should be like the new quote unquote leader, and it's leading to some like internal fighting in the alliance. It's like Switzerland's kind of got getting it back under control, but at the same time they've got a lot on their hands right now. Whereas over with Canada, they are they're really just blitzing through these countries. They've gotten about this far in Alaska, so good for them. Alright, so we see this new front line open into California, and over in America, it's it's not going as well as you'd think for America. They did kind of rely on the Great Lakes Empire's aid a bit. Um, they kind of can't now. Like they're almost a puppet state of the Great Lakes Empire, but it turns out that during one of the nukes that was dropped on their capital, which I think was actually only one nuke, or there's two, but during one of the nukes that was dropped here actually killed their dictator, and he didn't have any set heirs to the dictatorship. So there's a power gap here. Alright, but this green country here, they're actually able to invade into America, at least in this newer area. America really didn't they didn't solidify this area in time for the war. The Californians and these, er, yeah, the Californians and this green Mexican country were actually pretty close with each other. So like there's more stability here than there is out here, which makes sense. So we see the Texans kind of just having a easy day in this area. Same kind of goes for up in the north here. We see all of this being captured from Canada. And yeah, it's kind of half and half in this region between the triangles and the trapezoids, at least on the west coast. Like they've got more. The trapezoids have more land than triangles, but also like it's mainly just because they're focusing on the weaker countries and not actually fighting the strong ones. You see California being able to take over quite a lot of land back from Canada, and they don't have much forces down here. And like for once Canada burns through a lot their first like supplies, um, which they do quite quickly because their troops were trained for like a very fast, quick invasion, which is what the Great Lakes Empire trained a lot of their forces for too. And with extra aid coming over here, they can't really do it as well, so they starve through the little resources that they got, and it proves to be a big mistake. We still see Canada keeping a hold up in the north, but in the south, it's going more towards the triangles. Over in the far south, it's more mixed, but it's still triangles are doing the best here. With Texas, Texas didn't like anyone anyway, but if they had to choose someone, most of them would probably choose Green Mexico, and you see that becoming more true as the Green Mexicans invade into America. These guys were more so trained for like a longer uh, a longer fight that they can drag out and still supply, is they better ration food source or like they better ration supplies than these guys do. Um, and we see another invasion happening into Mexico too. Really, it mainly focuses in this panhandle, which is a lot of West Mexican population, but they also capture this major city, so that's good for them. All right, with the Caribbean nation, they don't really fight. Um, they're not really fighting against these guys. The countries that didn't have any nukes dropped on them kind of are like more calm in this war. I guess these guys did have a nuke dropped on them, but like the Caribbean country, they're really only fighting America because they want this land here in Florida, but they also want a bit more land over here. And while yes, they do also want some of the Central American country, they can go after that after the war because we all know that or the world all knows Korea's just using Central America to have a to be able to fight in this region. Korea isn't really supplying its allies, other than like in East Asia. They don't really care about fighting elsewhere or sending supplies elsewhere. They just care about like having that spot where they can do something. And the Trapezoid Alliance is most likely going to be the first one to fall. As we see, America's getting pretty heavily invaded. The Great Lakes Empire isn't able to do anything right now. Um, Canada's really the only one that's doing something, and even still, they're losing a lot of their territory in the south. These guys can't really do anything. And then, and then there's these guys down here, but they don't really like these guys here, and they really don't have anyone to directly invade. They haven't been equipped with the same capabilities as these two up here. So, so we see it. It's not gonna. It's not doing too well up in this region. It's not going to be too well for the trapezoids at all. Alright. We see Caribbean. You see the Caribbean nation pushes a bit into Mexico too. The Great Lakes or the Great Empire didn't really supply Mexico as much either. They thought the nukes would be able to them, deter everyone, but yeah, that's definitely didn't happen. Um, like these two are the only two nuclear countries in the world, which does automatically put them decently high in the rankings. They already both were top 20 powers anyway. But we're now going to come down to Africa, where this thing is going to reinvest itself into chaos. Let's see. Ethiopia. You like Tanzania, right? Well, Ethiopia is obviously going to say absolutely not. They pretty much blitzed through Tanzania, too. Um, let's be honest, Tanzania really never stood a shot. This pink country, despite being involved in the whole thing that went on down here, they're not involved because they're more aligned with the Circle Alliance than any of the other five. And let's be honest, it's a smart idea not to get involved. We all know what's gonna come. Or at least I do. I definitely know what's gonna come. Alright. So Tanzania's already pretty much been cooked. And they then get divided half and half. And now we see Ethiopian forces are sent somewhere else, whereas the gold team is more able to focus down here. It's really just a fight between the gold team and South Africa. There's these two really don't stand much of a threat to them, especially Tanzania didn't. So I wonder where Ethiopian forces went to. Obviously they went up here. Other and this area didn't really get any reinforcements by the Great Empire, and we see it falling over quite quickly as the Great Empire is kind of focusing more up in the north than they should be. However, they do have their areas of expertise, if you would call it that. Um, Firstly, they hate the Persian Gulf country, so these guys get invaded first. They spent about half no no about half of everything they put in this region was put just on the Persian Gulf country. And I mean, of these four, it is the strongest of them, followed by Persia. And these guys have direct border with everyone. So we see the Great Empire definitely is having some success down here as well. But the idea of war is becoming more unpopular as the war goes on. Taxes are getting higher, so the military gets funded, and they definitely don't like that. I mean, let's be honest, imposing taxes or after or because of war has never really been a good thing for empires. The British found that out the hard way. But we don't see the Great Empire focusing just on these guys. And they definitely also do have support from quite a few people, as like, they are winning every front they have right now, which is like That's quite a few fronts. They've taken two major cities from Persia as well. And then Tibet, Tibet borders three of the, both of these two border three countries that, the Great Empire was fighting against. Well, kinda. These two here don't have a direct war, so they're not being fought against, but yeah. Uh, sorry. Alright. But, these guys here are distracted, and these two are relatively equal in strength. I would say India is a bit stronger than these guys are, but, and also these guys are also fighting three fronts, whereas India is also only fighting one. However, this front quickly seals itself up as the Tibetans are able to force themselves down here. The Persians, well, for whatever reason, the Persians never activated their military. So their military is, despite what was going on, the Persian military, while yes, it is actually pretty decent, it was completely unprepared for this, and yeah, the Persian capital's been captured. So these guys are the Persian Indians, but anyway, all right, moving over to here. This is kind of interesting. What's going on here? So South China is in the Cross Alliance. We know that. These guys here are in the Diamonds. And then they're surrounded by Square Alliance members, which all of this is kind of, it's weird, to say the least, but um it it would make more sense it would make more sense. It would make more sense if these guys were with the Square Alliance, but they're not. And the Square Alliance hates them for that. So first country to do something is South China, as they captured the capital of the real South China, which sucks for you, but alright. And then we see Korea does their thing. Uh, they also they invade into central China, and they also invade down here, and they capture quite a few major cities, and are already trying to encircle the capital. They also will enter South China, or these guys are Hong Kong. I call them Hong Kong sometimes. But with the second major city in this country captured, suddenly the Great Empire has lost their first ally. Don't worry, they're not doing the worst. England just fell, so now we see Ireland is gonna refocus its troops. They're gonna send them out here because the Adriatic Union has just recaptured this major city, and this is very strong front that's going on here, and the Swiss capital is already about to get captured. So yeah, maybe things aren't going too well for you, Swiss. Maybe you should like refocus your troops. So that's exactly what they do. They refocus their troops to the inside. They tell West France and the other Iberian countries, go after Catalonia for us, knock them out of the war. It doesn't happen. These guys are. It turns out that these three here were in a non-aggression pact. Um, even though World War III broke out, they agreed they will not go to war with one another, West France was also kind of in on this. Although they said if Switzerland invades Catalonia or one of the other allies invades Catalonia, they won't directly invade Catalonia, but they will still aid the country invading Catalonia. But yeah. So Switzerland has lost all of its games in the Mediterranean Union as well. So that sucks for them, as also not to mention they also just kind of gave up on Corsica. Alright. Down in Ethiopia, the Great Empire does begin to re and or retake this land. They don't go they don't get too far back as this area was kind of nuked a lot, but eh, I think also up here there was no nukes up in these countries. Oh yeah, Egypt got destroyed. Alright, um, alright. So we see the Persian Gulf country is officially split into two. This major city's captured here, and then uh, they take up, they get up to the Persian Gulf. They then kind of focus. They they'll heavily defend that area, but they'll still refocus some forces up here to capture four major cities and the capital, and then two more major cities after that. Now splitting the country in three, and also it's already kind of quite unstable. So yeah, all right. Now for fighting in the Indian subcontinent. This is honestly where we're gonna have quite a bit of fighting going on. So we see Myanmar. Uh, well, everyone they border is an enemy except for India. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yep, everyone they border except for India is an enemy. No frenemies, just enemies. Which sucks for Malaysia, but they'll make do with it. And they begin an invasion of Myanmar, and it goes decent to start, but um, with countries now invading into this territory out here, now Korea's like, okay, yep, we're gonna send some aid down. All of you guys are gonna send aid over to these guys now. Red Australia can kind of handle their own, maybe. It's these three countries, and it's half the continent versus half the continent, really. But Australia has the better population areas, so they have a stronger, they have more manpower. They also have the stronger military, even though Korea doesn't really want to aid them anyway. All right, but with aid now coming in here, we see Bangladesh is kind of they're gonna back down a bit. Big mistake, by the way. Firstly, the gold team will enter into Tibet, despite them actually being having decent relations with each other. Um, this ruins it. But then they will also invade into uh, Bangladesh, which sucks for Bangladesh now. But we see Lake Baikal having a different focus as somebody finally retook their own land back, and that somebody being China. Also, these borders look hideous, do they not? Especially up in here, like up there and this look horrible. I don't know why I did that, but China's like one of the worst border countries in this area. Like it's got some areas where the borders are kind of decent, like right in here, even a bit down in here. But just the shape of the country is horrible. Same with Bangladesh. Like I don't I don't like it. The With one major city captured in China, they're gonna try and focus their troops up here. However, they also may or may not have gotten nuked quite a lot. Um, almost every country, all the five of the great powers got their capital nuked, which sucks for them. Only one of them had a backup capital, and that's because it's a union, and somebody was kind of only willing to do the union thing if they got to keep their capital, so lucky for them they had the backup capital that could have been real bad for them. All right. Now, Russia. Your front line is falling. Why? Another major city is captured in the west, which isn't where the support for the Great Empire is. It's more in the east. But yeah, Russia is Russia's done for. The Great Empire has captured all of this land, and yeah, Russia, you're done for. All right. Well, let's move on from Russia because we already know they're cooked. These guys, Lake Baikal will still kind of do stuff down here. Yeah, it's good. It's close enough to. All right. These two here. We see India getting to in. They're gonna be able to invade into Pakistan. That's gonna be their only invasion, though. They're not gonna send out their military anywhere, although they do own these naval islands. Uh, or they own these islands, and Sumatra doesn't really want them, or I think they're more Indonesia doesn't want them. Um, and also like these guys kinda have a bigger focus ish. They were told to do something even though they don't want to do it. But Sumatra will also be invading into Thailand. Well, that was quick. Now they have direct access to Myanmar. Alright, for the last frontline movement of the day, you know how I said these guys invaded into Mozambique a bit? Yeah, they did. Um, it didn't go it didn't go too far. Uh, I just had to show that by the way. But the real front movement is uh, it should be over. Yeah, it's over here. As these two kind of have to fight it out, and they're they're right next to each other in power rankings. I would put them right next to each other. Um, they are very equal in strength. I would give it to Brazil though. But if this was a one-on-one, both countries are gonna run each other out. However, these guys had to send supplies up north, which does kind of fumble their ability to like, fight here down here a bit. Whereas Brazil doesn't have to supply the main front line that their alliance leader was in. Mm. And since they don't have to do that, um, they have the upper hand. But now for the actual last event of the day, we come down to this blue Chilean country. More specifically, what they've just done. A vessel down here was discovered or was exploring these waters when he discovers an island in this far south. Hoping for more land to inhabit, they discover this whole chain, and from there they discover Antarctica. Now, you may be like, wait a minute, Antarctica's frozen. Well, yes, it is. But a little something about this universe. It's warmer, but something happened previously that for whatever reason changed like how Antarctica is. And now we go onto the Antarctica map. Whatever I saved it as. I yep, here. So seven but right up here. So about all of this is discovered. Um and yeah. So this will now be um this is a big topic of discussion, but also this like you will see this in this top corner. You will now see the Antarctica map. Right now, um they so winters in Antarctica are still bad. Um they're about equal to like a Siberian winter. But like summers here aren't actually as bad. So like if you get a good setup down here, you can actually live here now. I'm just gonna do something real quick to these. Uh, But yeah, that's the last event for this episode. Just gonna color this in. But if you enjoyed today's episode of What If Civilization Started Over, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.